welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something.
That's a good one.
Yeah, a question that's pretty chilling when you think about it.
Yeah, for sure.
What if the Cold War, that decades-long standoff between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, had actually turned hot?
It's a question that's fascinated, well, really everyone hasn't. I mean, historians, obviously.
Right.
Policymakers.
For sure.
Even artists. For decades.
Yeah.
We're going to be exploring all kinds of stuff today.
Yeah.
Declassified documents.
I love them.
Military analyses.
Ooh, exciting.
And even some pop culture, just to see how close we came to...
global catastrophe.
Yeah, and what might have happened if things had gone differently.
It's funny. We've got some really incredible sources for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
And you might be surprised, actually, to learn just how many times things almost went nuclear.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
We're talking like nail-biting close calls, like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, right.
1962.
Oh.
Where Soviet missiles were suddenly...
Oh, man.
Just 90 miles from Florida.
That's too close for comfort.
Can you imagine?
I mean, it's hard to overstate just how serious that situation was.
Right.
I mean, one wrong move.
Yeah.
A single miscalculation.
Oh, easily.
Could have just triggered,
yeah,
a full-blown nuclear exchange.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Gone.
But what's fascinating to me, at least,
is
that even with all that pressure, leaders like Kennedy
and Khrushchev,
were actually able to pull back.
From the brink.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Their decision-making, their communication, it's incredibly insightful even today.
And it wasn't just Cuba, though.
Right.
We're going to be looking at other potential flashpoints.
Oh, where else?
Like the Berlin blockade, 1948.
Okay.
Where Stalin tried to cut off West Berlin from the Allies.
Right.
It was, just this high-stakes game of chicken.
Oh, man.
Both sides with these massive nuclear arsenals.
Yeah, that's where Mandy comes in.
Mutually assured destruction.
Yeah. Did that idea, that balance of terror, really keep the peace? Or was it just a matter of time before
it boiled over?
Yeah, it's a question people still debate, actually.
Well, I bet.
I mean, on the one hand, the logic of MD is...
chilling.
Yeah, the idea that the only thing preventing nuclear war is the knowledge that both sides would be completely annihilated.
It's a lot. Yeah.
But it's also possible that very logic is what created the restraint that might not have existed otherwise.
Right.
We'll look at, the declassified documents, military analyses.
Love it.
See just how close those calculations came to failing.
Yeah.
And what those failures might have looked like.
So, okay, let's start with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
Perhaps the closest we ever came to nuclear war.
Yeah.
So it's October 1962.
Okay.
Soviets are secretly setting up these nuclear missile sites in Cuba.
Right, in America's backyard, basically.
Yeah, how did the U.S. even find out about this?
Well, it was actually a combination of good intelligence and a bit of luck, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, U-2 spy planes flying over Cuba. They captured photos of the missile sites being built.
That's crazy.
You can imagine the shock and disbelief when they developed those photos.
Right.
Suddenly, the threat of nuclear war.
Yeah.
It wasn't just an abstract concept. It was a terrifying reality.
Staring them right in the face.
Yeah.
I bet there was some serious panic in the White House.
Oh, for sure.
So what was Kennedy's initial reaction? Was it just straight to DEFCON 1 all-out war?
Surprisingly, no.
Really?
Yeah. Kennedy and his advisors, they knew how serious it was.
Right.
But they also understood that a rash response could be disastrous.
Oh, for sure.
So they opted for a naval blockade.
Okay.
They called it a quarantine.
Right.
To prevent further Soviet shipments to Cuba.
Okay.
It was a risk.
Yeah.
But a calculated one.
Right.
Designed to pressure Khrushchev without outright provocation.
Okay.
Fascinating example of strategic thinking.
Yeah.
Under, immense pressure.
It does sound like a tense game of chicken.
Oh, yeah.
Fate of the world hanging in the balance.
Right.
So what was happening on the Soviet side, though?
Well,
was Khrushchev just as cool under pressure?
From what we can tell from the Soviet documents, it seems Khrushchev initially pretty confident.
Oh, really?
That the U.S. wouldn't risk a confrontation over Cuba.
Yeah.
He saw it as a way to level the playing field.
Okay.
Considering the U.S. had missiles in Turkey?
Yeah.
Much closer to Soviet territory?
Right.
So he may have misjudged the American resolve?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So things are escalating.
Right.
Blockade is in place, and the world is holding its breath.
Yeah.
What happened next?
Well, for 13 very long days.
Oh, man.
The world watched as these two superpowers just stared each other down. There were a couple terrifying close calls.
Really?
A Soviet submarine almost launched a nuclear torpedo.
Oh, my gosh.
And a U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba.
Wow.
That's one of those.
It could have been it.
Yeah, it could have easily spiraled out of control.
It's absolutely chilling.
Yeah.
It really does sound like it could have gone nuclear.
Oh, yeah.
At any moment.
Absolutely.
So how did they manage to pull back from the brink?
Well, it came down to diplomacy and concessions, back-channel negotiations.
Right.
Kennedy and Khrushchev, they were desperately trying to find a solution.
Got it.
In the end, Kennedy publicly agreed not to invade Cuba and secretly agreed to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey.
Aww.
And in return, Khrushchev agreed to dismantle the Soviet missile sites in Cuba.
It sounds like a fragile agreement, but...
It was.
But they managed to avert disaster.
They did.
It makes you appreciate clear communication, even when tensions are high. Yeah, really high.
The Cuban Missile Crisis shows us just how precarious things were.
During the Cold Wars.
Yeah, and how easily things could have just...
spiraled.
Yeah, spiraled out of control.
But that wasn't the only time.
Right.
The world teetered on the brink of war.
What about the Berlin blockade?
Oh, that's right.
Remember?
Yeah.
Stalin trying to cut off West Berlin?
Yeah, remind me how Berlin was even divided in the first place.
Oh, okay. So after World War II,
right,
Germany, including Berlin, was divided up among the Allies, the U.S., UK, France, and the Soviet Union. And Berlin itself, even though it was deep inside Soviet-controlled East Germany, was also divided. The western part of the city, controlled by the Western Allies.
So you had this island of democracy, West Berlin, completely surrounded by communist East Germany.
Yeah.
Talk about awkward.
Awkward is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
And in 1948, Stalin, he decided to try and force the Western Allies out.
West Berlin.
Yeah, by blockading all land and water access to the city.
Wow.
He was basically trying to starve them out.
It's a bold move.
Yeah.
Pretty ruthless.
Oh, for sure.
Did the Allies just back down?
No, they did not.
What did they do?
Instead of escalating militarily, which I think Stalin expected, the U.S. and its allies responded with the Berlin airlift.
The Berlin airlift.
Can you imagine trying to supply an entire city by air?
It's mind-blowing.
It really is.
They flew in everything. Food, fuel, medicine, even coal.
For over a year,
wow,
planes were landing in West Berlin every few minutes.
Really?
24 hours a day.
That's incredible.
It was a huge feat of logistics.
Yeah.
And a testament to their commitment to West Berlin.
To West Berlin.
It also showed Stalin they wouldn't be intimidated.
So he could have shot down the planes.
Oh, easily.
But he didn't.
He didn't.
So another tense standoff.
Yeah.
Where, thankfully... restraint prevailed.
Yeah, what do you think Stalin was thinking?
Yeah, why not escalate further?
It's hard to know for sure.
Yeah.
But it seems like he underestimated the resolve.
Of the Allies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he also probably didn't want to risk a full-scale war.
Too soon after World War II.
Too soon, yeah. Cost of conflict was still fresh in everyone's minds.
So the blockade ultimately failed.
It did.
And the Allies stayed in West Berlin.
Exactly. And the Berlin airlift became this powerful symbol of Western resilience, a testament to nonviolent resistance.
Okay.
But these weren't the only times we came close to a hot war.
Really?
There were other, maybe less well-known incidents.
Okay, like what?
That could easily tip the scales.
I'm intrigued.
This one's from 1983, height of Cold War tensions.
Yeah.
It all came down to one man.
Okay.
Stanislav Petrov, lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces.
Right.
His job was to monitor the early warning system. Incoming nuclear missiles.
Can you imagine that pressure?
It's almost unimaginable.
So what happened?
So on a seemingly ordinary September morning, the system blares out a warning.
Oh, no.
5 U.S. nuclear missiles headed towards the Soviet Union.
Wow.
Petrov's protocol was crystal clear.
What was it?
Immediately report the attack up the chain of command.
Oh, wow.
And doing so would almost certainly trigger a full-scale retaliatory strike.
Wow.
So what did he do?
Yeah.
He hesitated.
Really?
Something about it felt off.
About the alert?
Yeah, it was too clean, too perfect. Instead of reporting it, he trusted his gut.
Why?
Marked it as a false alarm.
He went against protocol.
He did.
That's incredible.
And later investigations showed that the alarm was triggered by a malfunction.
Oh, wow.
in the satellite system.
So what was it?
Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds.
Oh, wow.
It was mistaken for incoming missiles.
So a technical glitch almost ended civilization.
Almost.
And it all came down
to one man's decision.
Wow.
It's terrifying how close we came.
Did Petrov ever get any recognition?
He did, but not right away.
Oh.
His story stayed classified for years.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until after the collapse of the Soviet Union that the world found out about his act of courage.
And clear thinking.
Yeah, a true unsung hero.
It's a powerful reminder that human factors played a crucial role.
In the Cold War,
it wasn't just, political ideology or military strategy.
It was about the people making decisions.
Yeah.
Often under immense pressure.
Yeah.
And with imperfect information.
And it makes you wonder, what if Petrov hadn't trusted his instincts?
What if he'd just followed protocol?
Where would we be now?
It's a chilling thought.
It really is.
We've only scratched the surface here. Right. We've talked about some close calls.
Yeah.
But what if things had actually gone differently?
What if one of those incidents had triggered a hot war?
What would that have looked like?
That's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
We're going to look at what those hot scenarios might have entailed.
Okay.
From nuclear exchanges to conventional warfare.
Great.
We'll explore the potential consequences.
Yeah.
The immediate devastation.
Right.
The long-term global impacts.
Wow.
The ways in which our world might have been completely altered.
Get ready for some serious what-if thinking.
Join us for part 2 of this deep dive
into a world that thankfully never was.
Thankfully. Welcome back to our deep dive
into what if the Cold War had gone hot.
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
To think about.
Yeah.
We just talked about all these close calls,
right.
But now
we're really going to go there.
Yeah.
We're going to imagine one of these scenarios actually
tipping over.
Yeah, into full-blown conflict.
So let's start with that scenario we were discussing earlier, Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
Imagine if instead of that tense standoff, an eventual compromise, one-sided,
miscalculated,
overreacting,
or just refused to back down.
So let's say a Soviet ship, tries to run the U.S. blockade,
right?
Or maybe an American pilot misinterprets orders,
right?
And it's seen as an act of aggression.
Okay, so what happens next?
Yeah, then what?
Well, in that scenario, the first strike would likely involve those very missiles.
Oh, wow.
That caused the crisis.
The ones in Cuba?
Yeah, Soviet nuclear warheads.
How are we hitting?
Major U.S. cities.
It's hard to even grasp that.
Yeah.
The immediate devastation.
Billions of lives lost instantly.
New York, Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Maybe even Los Angeles or Chicago. Just gone.
And of course, the retaliation from the U.S.
Oh, wait.
Would be just as swift and devastating.
Soviet cities like Moscow.
Yeah, Leningrad, Kiev.
Gone.
Likely targeted, yeah.
And it wouldn't just be those initial targets, right?
No, no.
I mean, MAD.
Yeah, mutually assured destruction.
That we talked about.
It would become a horrifying reality.
A chain reaction of annihilation.
Exactly.
Those initial strikes would just be the beginning.
Yeah, what about the fallout?
The radiation.
Yeah, how far would that spread?
The fallout from a nuclear exchange like that.
Yeah.
It would be catastrophic, right?
Truly catastrophic.
Radioactive particles carried by winds.
Across vast distances,
Contaminating water. Entire ecosystems.
Long-term health effects.
Cancers. Birth defects.
Yeah, and potentially even a nuclear winter scenario.
Nuclear winter, what does that mean?
So nuclear winter is this idea that so much dust and debris would be thrown into the atmosphere from the nuclear explosions that it would block out the sun.
Wow.
And that would lead to a global drop in temperatures and widespread crop failures.
It's a bleak picture.
It is, yeah.
But even beyond the immediate devastation and those long-term environmental consequences, what about the political fallout?
Oh.
How would a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and the Soviet Union have reshaped the world?
Well, for starters, it's hard to imagine either the U.S. or the Soviet Union surviving.
In their current form.
Yeah. I mean, their governments, their economies, their entire social structures
all
gone.
Shattered.
It's hard to imagine anything emerging from that level of devastation.
Yeah, so no more superpowers.
So, what takes their place?
It's impossible to say for sure.
Yeah.
The balance of power would shift so dramatically.
Right.
Countries that had remained neutral during the Cold War, India or China, they might become major players. Or maybe new alliances would form
Based on
survival and access to resources.
Wow.
Rather than ideology.
It's impossible to predict.
Yeah.
But it's safe to say the world order would be completely upended.
Completely.
And we haven't even talked about
the
psychological impact.
On a global scale.
Yeah, imagine living in a world
where the threat of nuclear annihilation isn't hypothetical anymore.
Yeah.
But a lived reality.
The fear, the mistrust, the sense that civilization is just hanging by a thread.
That would change everything.
It would be a profound shift in the human psyche.
Collective trauma.
Yeah.
Echoing through generations.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is.
But let's shift gears for a second.
Okay.
And consider another scenario.
Okay.
One that doesn't involve nukes.
All right.
But could be equally devastating.
Okay.
What if the Cold War had turned hot in Europe?
That's another scenario that thankfully stayed in the realm of what if.
Remember, Europe was the central stage for the Cold War.
Right.
And both sides had massive armies there.
Yeah.
Any number of things could have started a conventional war.
So we're talking about a direct military confrontation.
Yeah, between NATO and the Warsaw Pact.
Tanks rolling across the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, dogfights over Germany.
Oh.
Exactly. Imagine a border skirmish in Berlin escalating.
Okay.
Or a misinterpretation of military maneuvers.
That leads to a preemptive strike.
It would be devastating.
Europe would become a battleground.
Cities would be rubble.
Infrastructure destroyed.
Millions of civilians caught in the crossfire.
And while it might not be the immediate devastation of a nuclear exchange, a conventional war in Europe would still have profound global consequences.
The economies of Europe and the U.S.
crippled.
Yeah, global trade would halt.
And the political landscape
irrevocably altered.
It's hard to imagine Europe recovering from something like that.
Yeah.
And what about the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Would it be untouched?
Unlikely.
So other countries would be drawn in?
Probably, either through alliances or self-preservation.
Okay.
The war in Europe could easily spill over into other regions.
And further destabilize the world.
Yeah.
Whether it's a nuclear exchange or a conventional war.
Right.
A hot Cold War in Europe.
Global catastrophe.
With repercussions everywhere.
Yeah. And let's not forget about proxy wars.
Oh, right.
Remember how the U.S. and Soviet Union often fought indirectly?
Through proxy war.
Yeah, in places like Vietnam, Korea, and Afghanistan.
What if those proxy wars escalated?
Yeah.
To direct confrontations?
What if instead of just supporting opposing sides, they actually sent in their own armies?
Imagine U.S. troops in Vietnam facing off against Soviet soldiers.
Or a conflict in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Escalating to a direct confrontation.
Between the superpowers.
Versus regional conflicts would become global flashpoints.
Drawing in other countries.
And escalating to unimaginable levels.
So the alliances.
Yeah.
The political landscape.
Everything, yes.
Absolutely. Countries might be forced to choose new allies.
Okay.
Or to declare neutrality.
In a world that's suddenly become much more dangerous.
Exactly.
It's fascinating and a bit terrifying.
Yeah.
To think about how these different scenarios could have played out.
It really highlights how interconnected the world is.
And how even regional conflicts can have global implications.
And it shows how important it is to understand history.
Yeah.
Not just as dates and facts.
Right.
But as this complex web of choices.
And consequences.
And what ifs.
Yeah, but the Cold War wasn't just about politics and military might.
Right. It also had a huge impact on culture.
Exactly.
How people lived, what they feared.
How they expressed themselves.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the military and political aspects.
Right.
But it's important to remember.
It was a time of huge cultural upheaval.
And creativity.
Let's explore that side of the Cold War.
How did this global standoff seep into everyday life?
Yeah.
And find expression in art, music, and literature?
It's a fascinating area to explore because understanding the cultural impact of the Cold War can give us deeper insights into how people actually experienced this era.
Of tension and uncertainty.
Yeah, and how they found ways to cope with it.
And even challenge it.
Yeah, the prevailing narratives of fear and division.
Okay, so last time, things got a little dark.
Yeah, a little bit.
We were imagining those close calls.
Right.
Escalating into full-blown nuclear war.
Or even just conventional conflicts in Europe.
Makes you appreciate just how delicate peace is.
It really does.
But you were saying that the Cold War wasn't just about,
geopolitics.
Yeah, military buildup.
It also had a huge impact on culture.
Right, how people lived, what they worried about.
Even how they expressed themselves creatively.
It makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
People lived for decades knowing the world could end.
At any moment.
That's got to leave a mark on everything.
Absolutely, from art to music to the stories we tell.
And one of the things that I find really fascinating is how deeply the Cold War permeated pop culture.
It wasn't just a backdrop. It was a central theme, a source of anxiety, inspiration.
When I think about Cold War movies, the first one that comes to mind is Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, classic.
Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Such a long title.
I know, right?
1964.
We're in the middle of the Cold War.
What do you think it was about that film that resonated with people?
And why is it still so popular today?
Well, it's a black comedy, so it's funny. Yeah. But it also gets at the absurdity and terror of nuclear deterrence.
Like those crazy generals.
Paranoid politicians.
The whole system built on the logic that
the only way to prevent war
is to be ready to destroy the world.
Exactly.
It's wild how a movie can be hilarious and terrifying.
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
Wasn't it pretty controversial when it came out?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some people thought it was making light of the threat,
right.
But others, including Kubrick,
the director?
Yeah, they saw satire as a way to confront the absurdity of it all.
Make people think critically?
Yeah, about blind obedience and militarism.
It's like the movie is a mirror.
Reflecting those anxieties.
And a window.
Offering a different perspective.
What about other movies from that time?
Oh, yeah, tons.
Any that tackled the Cold War in a similar way.
Failsafe came out the same year as Dr. Strangelove.
Okay.
Much more serious.
Okay.
But it explores that same fear of accidental nuclear war.
From a technical malfunction.
Exactly. Technology gone wrong.
It's interesting how a film from 50 years ago can still resonate with us today.
Especially now with all our reliance on technology.
The algorithms, yeah.
It's like those anxieties are timeless.
Right.
Even if the context changes.
And of course, the Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, yeah, the brainwashed assassin.
Tapping into those fears of communist infiltration.
Sleeper agents.
It's crazy how those themes are still around.
In movies and TV shows?
It's true. Those Cold War anxieties still shape our culture.
In so many ways.
But it wasn't just movies.
Right.
What about music?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did the Cold War influence music?
Music was a huge outlet for artists to express their hopes and fears about the world.
Like 99 Luftballons.
Nina, yeah.
I remember that song being everywhere.
Total earworm.
It's actually about a pretty dark topic, though.
It is, yeah.
Mistaking balloons for enemy aircraft.
And starting a war.
Wow. Looks like a catchy pop song.
And also a powerful anti-war anthem.
Amazing how music can do that.
Right.
Are there any other examples of musicians commenting on the Cold War?
Definitely Sting's Russians.
Oh, right.
A plea for peace and understanding.
At the height of tensions.
Exactly. Challenging that us versus them mentality.
It seems like some artists used music to challenge the narrative.
Push for peace.
And others used it to reflect the fear and anxiety.
It's fascinating how art can serve so many different purposes.
It really shows the complexity of the human experience.
Especially during something like the Cold War.
And speaking of complex human experiences.
We can't forget about literature.
Right. Any books that stand out to you?
As capturing the essence of the Cold War.
When we were talking about the consequences of a hot war.
Right.
You mentioned nuclear winter.
Yeah.
And it made me think of On the Beach.
Oh, by Neville Shute.
Yeah, it's that post-apocalyptic novel.
Set in Australia.
After a nuclear war.
And they're just waiting for the fallout.
Bleak, but powerful.
A classic.
It really makes you think about the consequences.
Of nuclear war.
And how fragile civilization is.
It must have really resonated with readers back then.
In the 1950s.
When the threat was so real.
It's a reminder that even in dark times,
art can help us process our fears.
Find meaning, connect with others.
Who are going through the same things.
It's also a reminder that even with destruction,
there's still hope for resilience.
And finding connection.
It's been quite a journey today.
It has.
What stands out to you the most?
I think what's most striking is how fragile peace is.
It's easy to take it for granted.
But things could have been so different.
And those stories, the music, the films, they remind us of what's at stake.
And how important it is to strive for peace.
And understanding.
It's a lesson that's just as relevant today.
As it was during the Cold War.
We're still facing global tensions.
The threat of conflict.
But by understanding the past.
And exploring those what ifs.
Hopefully we can be more mindful of our choices.
And work towards a future
where peace is a lasting reality.
Well said. And we want to hear from you.
Yeah. What resonated with you?
What other historical turning points make you wonder?
What if?
Maybe your thoughts will inspire our next exploration.
Until then, keep questioning.
Keep learning.
And keep diving deep